Hey teachers, thank you for joining us today for the Chinese character training. If you are a student who's watching this video, great, you can learn a whole lot. If you are a teacher who wants to learn how to teach characters, I actually highly recommend Nick Chen's comprehensible input teaching training. I'm gonna post Nick Chen's Chinese CI training on my website because she is the best CI teacher I know in the US. Okay, now let's start. The reason why I want to provide this training for you guys is actually because in the past few years, I didn't emphasize characters a lot with my students. And then I realized it's really hard for them to break the bottleneck and improve from intermediate level to advanced level. So
Yeah.
a lot of times my students will say, well, I'm so busy, I don't have time for homework, so I don't want to learn characters. I would tell them you still need to learn, but then in my class, I didn't really reinforce how to learn it. That's a huge mistake I made before. The real reason why we have to learn characters is because we all know in order to have great output, decent output, you need to have good input. And input has two parts, reading and listening. If you don't read Chinese characters, then you lose 50% of the input. In China, we know some older generation, when they don't read Chinese characters, they can still speak Chinese, but then they don't sound very well educated, right? Because they're illiterate, let's be honest. So if you do want to speak decent Chinese, if you want to sound smart and professional, you kind of have to learn Chinese characters. But the good thing is
Yeah.
Chinese characters are super easy to learn. If you learn with us, they're like pictures. When you know how to analyze the root words, we call them 偏旁部首. They're basically the same as the English root words. When you know how to analyze the root words, you can analyze the meaning of the Chinese characters, which means by looking at Chinese characters, you can guess the meaning. So
hmm
that's why today we're going to emphasize 偏旁部首, the root words, a lot in the training. Personally, I think teachers should start exposing students to Chinese characters on day one. I saw that on your videos. You guys put the pinyin and the English translation. You didn't expose the characters to them. Then that's a signal to students. Characters are not that important, but we really have to expose them on day one. I've had students back when I was teaching in K-12. I've had middle school and high school students ask me, why do we need to learn these random, simple Chinese characters? We didn't even learn how to say them yet. Why do we need to learn how to write them first? Because we will separate all the characters and analyze each part, and then you can guess the meanings. That's when it become meaningful. So I always start with numbers because they're so easy. Everybody knows E is one stroke, R, two strokes, San, three strokes. So these are the easiest three characters. I always start with these three words. The order to teach Chinese characters is this. I have to write it down because it's so important. A lot of teachers will try to teach pronunciation, Chinese characters, the meanings all together. Students' brain will get really busy. They will get overwhelmed. We should help them get familiar with the pronunciation first, which means they hear san, they can link to the meaning three immediately. That's step one. Step two is after they heard the sound enough times, they will be able to say the word naturally. So research shows on average, not definitely, but on average, students need to hear a word 80 times in order to be able to pronounce it naturally. Naturally means you
hmm
don't push output. You don't say, hey, I say san, you say san. That's on us. We need to provide enough input for the students. So speaking is the second part. And the third part is actually reading or say recognizing. After you can say 三, let's analyze 三. It's 3 strokes. Very simple. And when you see 3 strokes, you know it means 3 in Chinese character. And then the 4th step is writing. Actually, for today's students, I think typing is good enough. Yeah, that's the order. When teachers try to teach everything at the same time, students get really overwhelmed. Do you guys have questions? And then when it comes to other numbers, it gets more complicated. Then I will ask students, why do you think 四 is 4? Whatever student says, I want them to use their way to remember the characters. If they tell me, I don't know why 四 looks like this, then I'm gonna give them some tips. What would your students say? 为什么四看起来是这样? I got different answers from my students. Okay.
Because there are 4 options or
Because there are 4
something.
corners, so it's 4. I have a student who told me this. You can see number 4 in this character. Another student told me, okay, 四 sounds like 死, death in Chinese. So they think this, the enclosed radical means it's a coffin. And then this 2 little strokes, they look like your feet when I look from the side. So it's like a dead person in the coffin. So students will give you really, really creative answers. I hate.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, I hate to boom the students' information. What would your students say? 为什么五是这样?
Some of them will say because 五 contains 5 strokes.
Yeah.
When they don't know, this actually is 1 stroke.
Yeah. So some students think, okay, because 1 is 1 stroke, 2 is 2 stroke, 3 is 3 stroke, 5 is 5 strokes. That works. I will say great. My students told me they remember 五 this way. You can actually see 五 in the character. Yeah, that's what they told me. I love this. Whatever they say, I'll be like, okay, great. That's a great answer. And then when it comes to 六七八九, you can use the same way to teach students. But we will start learning the most basic radicals very early on. I will tell the students these simple words are characters, but sometimes when they become radicals, they will change the formation. Sometimes they won't change the formation, but knowing these basic characters are foundations for you. So we always start with characters that still look like what they were in the past. So 日 looks like sun. Whoops. 月 looks like moon. 山 looks like mountains. 水 looks like water. Of course, when we were teaching the characters, I wouldn't give them the answer so quickly. I will always ask them, 这是什么?这是什么?这是什么? 99% of the times, people can guess the most basic characters. I would also teach 火,这是什么?木,这是什么?人,这是什么?口,这是什么? And I just want them to feel all the characters are so simple, so they don't feel overwhelmed. So they have a motivation to continue learning Chinese. Sometimes teenagers may ask, why do we need to learn these random words? I don't care what wood is, but I will tell them, you need these foundations to analyze complicated characters in the future. It's like if you want to learn how to snowboard, you need to have strong leg muscles first. So maybe you will go to the gym to do squats first. Okay, after that, I'm gonna combine the words together to create new characters to show them how Chinese people can look at the character and guess the meaning. I'm gonna put all the foundation words right here, and then I will ask them, 你看到了什么? They may say, 我看到火. 你看到几个火? 我看到2个火. Okay, we got 2 fires. 所以盐是 hot. It's like a game where we're having fun with characters. And then here, 修,你看到了什么? Students will say, 我看到了木. They probably wouldn't recognize 人 radical just yet. That's great because I want to expose them to 人 radical. I will tell them very directly, 人 is a character. But like I said, sometimes when they become a radical, they will change the formation. So the people radical actually changed a little bit. They look similar, but changed a little bit. Then today's homework, I will definitely tell them you need to memorize these radicals. We're gonna test in the next lesson. So you will see a person and a tree or a wood. 这是什么? I'm gonna ask them to analyze what this means. Whatever way they want to analyze it, as long as it helps them remember the meaning. I will say 太棒了，对对对。好, so a person is leaning on the tree. So the person is resting. So they'll be like, oh yeah, it makes sense. Da, da, da. We always start with the most logical ones. And then Ming, I will ask them, 你看到了什么? They will compare here. 我看到了日，我看到了月. So when you have both the sun and the moon, of course, it means bright and also smart. And 聪明, that's a great way to teach them 聪明. If my student guess the meaning, I will say 你很聪明, 你很聪明, smart, smart, bright. So just give them little motivations, little treats to have fun with learning Chinese. Okay, now we make it a little more complicated. I will say now I'm gonna give you a word, a phrase, a word, based on the foundation words you learned. You don't need to even know the pronunciation just yet. Can you guess the meaning of it? They will say, okay, 3 trees, 2 trees. So we got 5 trees, a lot of trees here. Most students can get that's forest. Yeah, 森林. And then 你看到什么? Students will say, oh, I see fire. I see mountains. Fire, mountain. 90% of the students can guess this is volcano, 火山. Next one. Okay, 你看到了什么? Students will say, I see mouth. I see water. So this phrase is saliva. If students are having fun with the characters, I may say, I'm going to give you some bonus. I will say, okay, I'm going to teach you more characters because you can master more than what I imagined. 聪明, 聪明. Okay, I'm going to teach them 田. This is field. When the farmers grow stuff on the land, it's 田. 力, it's 力气. It's power and strength. And then I'm gonna ask them to guess what is 男人. Guess the character. They see the power in the field. This is more difficult for them to guess because they don't have that traditional culture. And then I'm gonna explain why the main labor, the main strength in the field is a man, a male. If they can guess that, I'll also teach them 女孩. You know, with traditional Chinese character, they will show you a lady sitting on the floor with their hands on their laps. A lot of students don't see why that character become 女 today. So I just ask my students, then why do you think 女 is female, is girls, is women? They will say, oh, because when girls are very elegant, they always cross their legs. They will sit like this. It looks very elegant. That's why 女
That's a good one.
crossed legs. Students are really creative if you just encourage them to guess and they can have more fun. The first day, I'll teach the most complicated 5 characters, and then we can move on to the next ones. I'm gonna introduce hand gestures, and I'm gonna use TPR to help them memorize all of these. After they memorize the hand gestures, I'm gonna talk about characters because Liu looks the character Liu upside down, so it's easy for them to remember. Qi, because it looks like 7. Qi. It also looks like money. And the 777 in America means you win the gambling. 八 once they remember the gesture, they will know, oh, ba is the character ba upside down. So it's really easy for them to remember. 9 is the Arabic number. 10 is exactly like the character. The hand gesture will help them memorize the characters. So I will combine TPR with the characters. And then the next class, I'm gonna start talking more about radicals. We're gonna review sun, moon, mountains, wood, human, mouth, all of these. And then I'm gonna tell them, actually, remember I said when some characters become radicals, sometimes they change the formation, sometimes they don't. For example, water, 水 will change their formation into 2 different radicals. The first one is 3 drops of waters. They are always related to liquid. If the character has 3 water drop radical, this character is related to liquid. Or 2 drops of water. This kind of character is always related to like ice.
Ice.
Yeah, ice formation type of water. This is super easy to remember. We don't need to give them examples just yet. But every time we review old vocabulary, when it's time to review and analyze characters, I will ask them, 你看到了什么? And then I'll see if they remember the radicals. If they don't, it's totally fine. It's because we haven't exposed them to the radicals enough yet. And then I will talk about 火. This radical is usually in the bottom of the character because imagine when the fire is burning, it's always in the bottom. This is easy for them to remember. Originally, Dao is like this. And then when we simplified it into a radical, it will become this. And Dao is a super useful character too, because when we use US dollar, I will tell them Chinese money is yuan, US dollar is Dao. So it's super useful. Also, it looks like a knife too. So it's easy for students to remember. 土, it's hard for students to guess why 土 means dirt, because when you have the top layer of dirt and the bottom layer of dirt, you have a sprout that is trying to come out. That's emphasizing 土. It's coming from the original Chinese character. And 大, I will ask them, 你看到了什么? People will tell me, oh, it's a person. That's the head. That's the arms. That's his or her legs. He's spreading his body, so it's 大. And then I will ask students, 为什么小是 small? They will give me all kinds of answers. They will say, oh, because it looks like an arrow. It's getting smaller and smaller. They will give me all kinds of answers. Say you finished lesson 1 vocabulary. We created class stories with them. They can say the class stories already. Then we need to really go back to the class story to read the class story with them. The first time we might read in pinyin, and then the second time we need to take away the pinyin and focus on the characters. We pick the most important characters to analyze. Just do games, analyze them, test if students remember the characters. I know in one lesson, there's no way we can analyze every single characters, but every time you read the class story, you can pick 1 or 2 most important word from lesson 1, lesson 2 to analyze. So help them form the habit of analyzing characters. Lesson 4, lesson 5, we're gonna review a little bit and then learn a little more new words. Yesterday we learned 大, big. I'm gonna ask them 大人是什么? Big person. Some of them will say, oh, adults. They will get it. Then I'm gonna say, I will give you a bonus. 你很聪明. 小人是什么? They will be like, oh, small person. Then it means kids. That's when we can introduce a little bit Chinese culture. I will say Confucius created the word 小人. It actually means a sneaky person, a person who has no integrity, a person who's gonna stab you behind your back. That's 小人. They will think it's really interesting because you cannot use the same Western logic to analyze Chinese characters. And then we can play with 中, we can play with 天, So just make them feel like, okay, I learned this character today, and then tomorrow we're talking about weather. Then I know 晴天,阴天,下雨天 is this one. And the day 6, day 7, we add a little more characters. The most important thing is the Chinese radical dictionary. Look, we have over 50 most basic Chinese radicals. We may spend maybe 10 lessons to introduce all radicals, but we want the students to memorize all of them. I will give you guys a very vivid example. It's really hard for students to remember what. So I'm gonna ask them, what characters do you guys see? They will say, I see the hand radical, which is 23, 手 radical, hand radical. And they will say, I also see 歌, which is 21st, the dagger radical. If you just teach characters in the traditional way, it's really hard for them to remember what's hand and dagger to do with 我. So I'm gonna ask them, yeah, exactly why. Students may or may not give you creative answers. I will tell them this. In ancient or old time, when people just created characters, they had very limited resources. They need to fight for food, land, women, and everything. When you're fighting with your enemy, you want you to be the person who has a knife in hand. You don't want them to be the person to have a knife. And that is related to the character 你. I will ask them, what do you guys see? 你. They will say, okay, on the left side, we see the person radical. And then on top, we see a little knife radical, 刀. You will see a knife. And then in the bottom, we will see 小, small. So I'm gonna ask them why. Why 你 means a person with a small knife. Because in ancient time, you want the person with the small knife to be the other person. You want you to be the person with the huge dagger. That's how they can remember the characters. Just create stories with them. All kinds of stories. Or when I teach the word 想,想要,想, I will tell them 想要 means want right now, but it also means miss. In the future, we will learn that meaning. So 你看到什么? They will say, oh, I see wood radical. And then I see, oh, that's the mu, ice radical. And then in the bottom, I see 心, the heart radical. So why would I and heart is miss or want? And then the students will start giving me crazy stories. They will say, oh, because wood also means trees. When I lean on a tree and close my eyes, my heart is all about you. That means miss. They will give me really creative stories. So that's the purpose of the radical dictionary. I don't want you to remember them like a robot. I want you to use them to create stories with the characters. Sometimes homework can be really boring, but maybe today's homework is I will give you the character and I will give you the dictionary. Can you give me a story about this character? Anything that's going to help you remember the character. I think that's the best way to teach characters. Do you guys have questions?
Yeah, for those students who really just want to focus on speaking, has no intention at all of learning Chinese characters, what do you do?
Yeah, this is more like a coaching question. On day 1, I will emphasize how important characters are. I will give examples to my students. I know 3 people who reached fluency level in 18 months. I interviewed them one by one, and all of them emphasized the importance of learning characters. I used to teach at the US Department of Defense. The students need to reach advanced level in 64 weeks. And they told me when you are familiar with the characters, it actually helps you with pronouncing them. Like in your brain, you cannot see that, but they are all linked together. I don't know how learning characters actually help them remember the meaning or pronouncing the words, but that's what the students told me. And I've seen too many students who cannot move from beginner to intermediate or from intermediate to advanced level without characters. You really miss half of the input. You cannot read stories or books, then your Chinese will be stuck. So I will explain the consequence to them and really sincerely suggest them to learn characters. If you ask people who are fluent in Chinese, I do not believe they don't recommend learning Chinese characters. Yeah, just give them real life examples and emphasize on day one how important it is. And give them
Okay.
a lot of confidence. Tell them if you already know characters, you're gonna be fluent faster than other students. I believe in you. You work hard and you can do this. Give them tons and tons of confidence. I really think language teaching is not just about teaching you vocabulary or grammar points. It's really about teaching confidence. If you can learn
Yeah.
Chinese characters, maybe you can apply the same discipline to other stuff in life. This is what I want to pass, confident, not just some vocabulary and grammar points. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you are a teacher who have been watching the entire video, I highly encourage you to join Nick Chen's teachers training. I know 3 best master CI Chinese teacher in the US, and she's one of them. She's been teaching Chinese for 25 years, and she won Teacher of the Year in 2015. And she's my mentor. Everything I learned about comprehensible input, not everything, 90% of what I learned is from Nick Chen. So I highly encourage you guys to do that.